Tora Colwill. So, Tora set up and chairs the Brighton Death Forum, which is an open forum geared to uniting local people from diverse parts of the community who are interested in promoting the important conversation around improving the experience of death and dying in our modern city. This is such an important and unusual conversation to be had. We've become very open about sexuality and other taboos, but death is one that hasn't quite come forward yet. And because here at Inspiring Talks Brighton, we love to smash through taboos and smash through all those things that are just the status quo. That's why when Tora stepped up and Sarah, I was like, yeah, definitely. So here she is. Please welcome to the stage, Tora Colwill.
Thanks. And I like how we've covered up the happy birthday as well with the death. Yeah, okay, so I'm Tora Colwill and I've established a service called the Modern Funeral that exists to put people in more control of where they spend their money and of how personally involved they are in their funeral proceedings. So first, although you've really helped, but we'll get this little fact out of the way. We do all die. Humans respond to death in many ways throughout the world, and these responses evolve over time. Lately, we've been giving the dead a bit of a bad rep, so endlessly honouring youth and beauty, and the dead are often depicted as rotten old zombies in films, which is not necessarily helpful when lots of us, I would imagine now, haven't actually seen a real dead person, and often not in a natural state. We have a lot to learn from death. It's the instigator of our creativity, and it's available as a constant reminder to get perspective and to make the most of things. In recent times in our country, we've allowed a certain professionalisation of death, and you were talking about medicalisation of death too. So it might be useful for us to recognise that what we currently understand as funeral traditions are more just recent conventions. A funeral usually consists of practical and ceremonial elements. So practically, what happens to our body, who cares for it and how, and then how we mark a death and how we remember a life. You can plan the shape of your own funeral. A little bit of guidance can help those that you leave, making it easier for them, but there's also an argument that you get the funeral you're given and that it's a response. We seem to be moving away from the dramatic theatrical burials of the Victorian era, not least because we're running out of space for graveyards. Beautiful though they may be, and I did spend time in them as a teenager, graves are rented space adorned through Victorian vanity with what turn into wonky, moss-eaten monuments, unsafe monuments to a person's life, and there's not infinite space for this approach. Natural burial offers us a more sustainable burial option, and it's on the rise. Established in the early 90s, there are now over 300 dedicated natural burial grounds around the UK. They're run in a number of ways, sometimes with unmarked graves, so that the whole place becomes a monument to the person you've buried there. Most don't accept embalmed bodies as the chemicals threaten the environment. There may be a non-denominational chapel space there for ceremonies, or these could simply be held around the graveside. Often people are buried in shallow 3-foot deep graves to allow for aerobic decomposition and for the body to quickly return to nature. At the moment, around 70% of deaths in the UK are followed by a cremation. This is Woodville Crematorium in Brighton. It's pretty church-like looking, and it's worth reminding ourselves that this is a non-denominational space. So when using the chapel space there, we can take it over, take the crosses down if that suits and is appropriate for everyone. Personally, I found the curtains and the hydraulics, the theatre of it, quite confusing as a child. I knew that something really important was happening, but I was craning my neck and it felt more like something was happening to me, and I felt detached from it. When you shatter the mystery, you discover that even as the curtain goes round, your loved one might join a queue, to be cremated sometime soon, so you actually leave them there. As Brighton Death Forum, which is an umbrella for people who are interested in evolving our experience of death and dying, we offer guided back-of-house tours of Woodville, Crem, so behind the theatre and into the operation of the place. Demystifying death can be helpful, and the physicality of death itself can offer us an opportunity and some space to process what's happening. Around the world and throughout history, the ritual and practical needs of dealing with death can merge with varying degrees of impact. So if we look at Tibetan Sky Burial, for example, on a mountaintop where it's not possible to dig down and there's not enough trees to source wood for cremation, then there's a need to do something unexpected. The bodies are laid out on the mountaintop and can be cut so the meat is exposed. Vultures fly in to carry the body parts off in different directions. And though this may seem brutal, the function of a sky burial is simply to dispose of the body in as generous a way as possible. And there's a certain parallel here, maybe, in signing up to donate your organs or your tissues to medical science or to a body farm even. You know, putting your vessel out there to see what use it might be for others. And there are countless examples of different cultures dealing with death in interesting ways that can seem quite alien to us, but there's inevitably things to learn from these different perspectives. Open air cremation could be a future option too. This slide is from the Craystone End of Life project in the US. One aspect of their work is to facilitate gentle open air cremation ceremonies. Outdoor cremation being a familiar practice in India, and there are people investigating the possibility that it might be a real option in the UK too. It can be a dramatic and beautiful process to watch. There are contemporary projects around the world being developed to offer solutions of how we might designate space in our modern cities for our dead. So Washington has just voted to pass a new bill legalizing natural organic reduction of human remains, which is a fancy way of saying composting bodies. Known as recomposition, a company called Recompose are aiming to build the first facility for this purpose. The progressive thinking and appropriately named CEO Katrina Spade explains recomposition uses an eighth of the energy of cremation and saves over a metric ton of carbon dioxide per person who chooses it. It's still in the development stages. I'm not sure it's my perfect way to go, but it interests me and it's marrying that practical and the ceremonial in our modern world. On the subject of composting, so here is the Infinity burial suit, which was formerly known as the mushroom death suit. The spores of mushrooms are threaded into the veins of the suit, mushrooms that have been selected and trained to thrive on human flesh. So choosing to be buried in this suit means that your body will be broken down in a really efficient and green way. And according to his daughter, as was his wish, actor Luke Perry has recently been buried in one. Here's a more clinical option: alkaline hydrolysis, reservation or cremation by water. It's already operating in parts of America and Canada, and it's billed again as a green alternative to cremation. It works by dissolving the body in a heated alkaline water, which is pressurized to 15 atmospheres in this tank. The bones are then removed from the unit and processed in the same machine that's used to crush bone fragments following a cremation by fire. All the metals, including mercury and artificial joints, are safely recovered. This method's interesting too, but it does strike me as really clinical. Remember, there are no rules when it comes to funerals, just a range of expectations to manage. As well as our own personal choices about what to do with our remains, we must also consider those who've been left behind. As we become a more secular society, we still gather, reflect, and search for meaning when a death occurs. We can create beautiful spaces that can house gatherings for people of differing beliefs, relying on great music and carefully chosen words to manifest a sense of the other, whatever that means to people. And you can hold a funeral anywhere. I've arranged memorials in my lovely local art house cinema, for example. The auditorium lends itself to gathering people for a focused, transformative service. Photographs of the person's life on the screen are a good touch, and choosing these familiar and favourite environments can help everyone to feel comfortable while vividly remembering the person who's died. And where more familiar than home? So here we can start to think about these are some sacred barrows, actually. Sorry. Yeah, the sacred barrows I edited out and forgot. Sorry. So here we can talk about the DIY, the direct it yourself, or the home funerals. These tasks, the car journeys, the washing, the dressing, choosing, making, or decorating a coffin, these are the last things that you can do for somebody to give you an opportunity to make sense of what has happened and the difficulty of what has happened. We can all be more involved in the funeral process. I would have loved to have painted my granddad's coffin, for example. I think it would have worked as a transformative ritual for me, and I probably wouldn't be doing this if I had have done. Simple rituals can be repeated as a way of keeping us connected to our dead. Research suggests that engaging in rituals helps us to restore a sense of control and order at a time when we feel utterly powerless. So they can help us to cope with our grief and to move forwards in a healthy way. The ritual act could be as simple as lighting a candle. There are now lots of options of what to do with the ashes that result after the cremation process. You can have them incorporated into some jewellery. They can be pressed into a vinyl record with a favourite song, or made into firework rockets and fired over a favourite place. 90s pop artist KLF have collaborated with some progressive undertakers from Totnes to introduce the concept of mummification. For a mere £99, you can have your ashes incorporated into a brick, and then every Toxteth Day of the Dead, the bricks accumulated over that year will be fixed as part of a people's pyramid. It's a cool idea, again, maybe a bit niche, but the possibility of evolving our modern experience of death is made clear. Our needs are changing in many aspects of our lives, and these changes should be reflected in how we respond to death. To help us negotiate these changes, funeral directors, as gatekeepers and as the human face of the funeral industry, should guide us into achieving better experiences when we have to arrange funerals. The role of the funeral director has evolved over time too. It's adopted a medical edge, embalming being invented on the American Civil War battlefields as a means of getting the fallen great distances and intense heat in one piece back home. Funeral directors operate as event organisers. It's good to have somebody with a clear head on the day, but they shouldn't steal the show. Even moral authorities, and then most dangerously, perhaps, as salesmen. So, some funeral directors might be guilty of offering packages and streamlining options for vulnerable people. Embarrassing. Flexible funeral directors can save us money and help keep things simple, allowing room for all the people stuff, the emotional experience, and a healthier bereavement process. Funerals that cost less but mean more. Often taking control and personalising things does equate to saving significant sums of money. Cost of funerals obviously are rising, and thinking of ways that we can creatively challenge that, I think, will be welcomed by many. Separating the practical from the ceremonial is one way to keep costs down. Some people are now opting to transcend that conveyor belt funeral, perhaps holding a simple gathering at the crematorium or no ceremony at all, or choosing a direct cremation. Opting for this allows you to do something meaningful with the ashes in your own time. David Bowie, for example, had a simple no-fuss cremation in New York for $700, and then followed by a Buddhist scattering ceremony on a beach in Bali for a select group. The possibilities are endless, and the main thing is that we open up and discuss them. With our relaxed regulations in this country that place ownership of dead firmly in our hands, we're in a strong position to marry ceremonial and practical considerations in ways that make sense to us. And I do think that Brighton's a brilliant place for that too. I like the fact that we're reminded of our connection to nature through death. The rituals surrounding this are our good habits. And weirdly, I found that I've become happier through approaching death and including it in my life. It brings a kind of ultimate perspective. This is an important conversation, as you said, that informs how we live. And there's kindness in being straightforward about it. So let's work on searching out the appropriate answers together. Thank you.